So unlike Ukraine, to be clear, sir, U.S. forces, U.S. men and women would defend Taiwan in the event of a Chinese invasion.
Yes.
I think we have a saying in China, in Chinese, called 天灭中共, which means the heaven eliminates the CCP. So I think in the year 2022, we are starting to see this happening. And in this year 2023, the speed of the heaven eliminates the CCP may be sped up.
The Chinese Communist Party's downfall is well underway under Xi Jinping, says Jennifer Zheng, the host of Inconvenient Truths. 2022 was the year when the Chinese president secured an unprecedented third term at the 20th National Congress of the Communist Party of China. But it was also the year when Xi witnessed the biggest public discontent since he came to power in 2012. Let's look at how the last 12 months challenged the authority of the President of the People's Republic of China. In November, protests flared across mainland China. Nearly 3 years into the pandemic, people took to the streets in different parts of the country to protest against the controversial zero-COVID policies. For Xi Jinping, who assumed power a decade ago, this wave of civil disobedience was an unprecedented challenge. Slogans like "Down with the Chinese Communist Party," "Down with Xi Jinping" rocked the entire nation. The protests were carried out in response to a fire on the 24th of November. 10 people were killed in a high-rise building in Urumqi, the capital of the Xinjiang region. The incident sparked widespread public anger. Many internet users claimed that residents could not escape because the building was partially locked down. Students at universities in cities including Nanjing and Beijing were seen holding up blank sheets of paper in a silent protest. These unmarked sheets of white paper have become a potent symbol of defiance. Throughout the year, we've seen these videos going viral. Xi's signature zero-COVID policy led to community lockdowns and people being forced into quarantine camps. Some residents under lockdown said they were running out of basic amenities.
The Chinese government capitulated on COVID-19. It didn't change its policy. It just completely failed. It had the zero COVID approach for years, which was to prevent any transmission of the disease. But a couple things happened. First of all, the Chinese people wouldn't accept it anymore. And we saw that with the extraordinary series of protests that began at the end of October and especially after the November 24th fire, but also local municipalities, which were responsible financially for the zero COVID policies, just ran out of money. And that even included Beijing, the capital city. But also the zero COVID just crippled the Chinese economy. So I think the regime decided it just couldn't continue with zero COVID. It just continued for as long as it could, and then it just completely failed.
In December, the country abruptly relaxed its zero COVID policy. As a result, China is battling a record surge of infections. 3 years ago, the country reported the first official case of COVID-19. And now it has once again become the epicenter of COVID infections. Xinjiang, a big industrial province near Shanghai, is battling around 1 million new daily COVID-19 infections. Remember, Beijing has not approved any foreign COVID-19 vaccines for use by its citizens. Instead, it relied on Chinese vaccines like Sinovac and Sinopharm. Experts say these are as effective as other globally approved vaccines. China's healthcare system is under enormous strain. The National Health Commission has stopped reporting asymptomatic infections, making it harder to track cases. So, what's Xi Jinping's strategy?
Not only they suddenly end the lockdown, but they intentionally speed up the spread so that they have a term like 快速过风, which means they want the peak to be reached and then to be over as fast as possible. I think that is the strategy where they want to trade people's life for time. They want this thing to get over before March next year, so that in March next year they will have the most important political conference of each year called 两会. It's the People's Congress and the Congress for the People's so-called political consultative conference, when the new government will be sworn in their office. So they are actually intentionally, according to many people, speed up the infection so that this thing can get over quick.
Is the government spreading the virus on purpose, or are they left with no options? Either way, the consequences are disastrous. Health authorities have warned that the infection rate could peak in January, when many people would be traveling to their hometowns for the Lunar New Year. The celebration is considered to be the world's largest annual migration of people. Before the pandemic, the event would see as many as 3 billion trips made across China. Can the world afford to risk another pandemic?
We know that the virus is mutating in China right now. And we know that countries are not imposing restrictions on arrivals from China. So the natural conclusion is that Chinese passengers or Chinese arrivals are going to be spreading new variations of this disease. And I believe that countries need to put a travel ban on arrivals from China. It might be too late, I don't know, but the point is that we don't need any more COVID-19 in the world. And China is the source of new strains of this.
The zero COVID policy has also suffocated the world's second largest economy. The frequent and severe lockdowns massively curbed consumer spending, disrupted supply chains, and resulted in massive job losses. This is Foxconn's flagship iPhone plant in Chengdu, in central China. Not too long ago, violent protests broke around the plant as workers clashed with security personnel over pay and living conditions. Incidents like these have led foreign companies to look at options away from China.
That Foxconn's leaving. That's not the only company. I see from small and medium-sized companies in Germany throughout 22 already decisions having been taken that it is not necessarily because of COVID or zero COVID policy, but because zero COVID has shown that it can be fatal if you are too dependent on one economic partner.
The 26th of December, 71 Chinese warplanes illegally entered Taiwan's air defense identification zone. According to the island's government, it was the largest Chinese intrusion into the Taiwanese territory to date. This Chinese fleet included both fighter jets and drones. 43 aircraft crossed the Taiwan Strait, the unofficial buffer separating the two sides. While Taiwan has been trying to assert an independent identity, China continues to claim it as an inalienable part of its territory under the One China principle.
国家统一、民族复兴的历史车轮滚滚向前，祖国完全统一一定要实现，也一定能够实现。
In October, China's leader vowed to reunite Taiwan with mainland China. His speech came 2 months after Nancy Pelosi's historic visit to Taiwan. The Speaker of the United States House of Representatives defied a string of warnings and threats from China to land in Taipei. It was the highest profile US visit to Taiwan in 25 years. China viewed it as an unacceptable challenge to its claims over the island. A day after her visit, the People's Liberation Army began unprecedented 4-day live-fire military drills. It encircled Taiwan from the 4th to the 7th of August. Could China invade the region in 2023?
Xi Jinping actually believes that he will be the one to annex Taiwan, because he's been saying all along that this cannot be a problem. He calls Taiwan a problem. So Taiwan has to understand that this is an issue of time. And Taiwan has to understand that, that within Xi Jinping's tenure, they should expect a real attempt to annex it. He's told us what he wants to do. He is preparing Chinese society for war, not only the military, the fastest military buildup. He's trying to sanction-proof the Chinese government, and he's also mobilizing Chinese civilians for war.
Although the US insists that its Taiwan policy has not changed, President Joe Biden has vowed to defend Taiwan against a possible Chinese invasion.
The United States will supply arms, and I think sufficient arms, to Taiwan. Secondly, President Biden has 4 times since, in the 2 years since taking over as president of the US, has stated 4 times that, of course, in the case of an attack on Taiwan, the United States would come to the help, to the aid of Taiwan, something that the United States in the past has kept ambiguously, to leave it as an open question.
In November, Biden met Xi at the G20 summit in Bali, Indonesia. This was their first in-person meeting. The US president reiterated his support for the One China policy. He also told reporters that he does not think there's any imminent attempt on the part of China to invade Taiwan. Will he be proved right?
If there were to be war in the Taiwan Strait, for instance, that would mean conflict at both ends of the Eurasian landmass. That starts to look like World War III. And yes, that certainly could overturn the world order, depending on who prevailed in that contest.
The year gone by saw Taiwan gaining global support. In November, Lithuania opened a trade office in Taipei. In September, European lawmakers issued a joint appeal calling for an investment agreement with Taiwan.
This year, things are changing. People are no longer that afraid of China, and so many Western politicians keep visiting Taiwan.
February 2022, Beijing hosted the Winter Olympics. But several countries announced a diplomatic boycott of the event. These included the US, the United Kingdom, Canada, and Australia. The reason? Widespread allegations of Chinese atrocities against the Uyghur community. India too joined the boycott after a Chinese soldier who had fought during the Galwan Valley clashes with Indian troops was made an Olympic torchbearer. Few sporting events have provoked as much controversy as this one.
I think, yes, we see a huge difference between what happened when in 2008, Beijing has its first Summer Olympic happened. I think over the presidents of over 80 countries, including the president of America, all go into Beijing to express their congratulations. That was the first time Beijing had the Olympic. But this in 2022, when Beijing had a second chance for Winter Olympic, no major leaders from the whole world went there. And the most important one, of course, was Russian President Putin.
Ever since Xi Jinping became president, the ties between China and Russia have deepened. They have supported each other militarily, economically, and politically. Just weeks before Russia invaded Ukraine on February 24th, Putin and Xi met in Beijing. So what did the two leaders discuss?
I couldn't remember the detailed number, but a huge amount of contract from Beijing and a contract of Beijing buying oil and other products from Russia, and that money gave Putin a huge boost or confidence that he can go ahead with the war against Ukraine.
In recent years, China has become famous for wolf warrior diplomacy. It's a tactic that goes as far as insulting or threatening those deemed to violate China's interests.
Everything we discuss is leaked to the paper. That's not appropriate.
This year, too, China remained locked in Xi Jinping's aggressive diplomacy.
Not all the way the conversation was conducted.
Who can forget this scene? The Chinese leader chastised Justin Trudeau, the Canadian Prime Minister, at the G20 summit.
What we will continue to have, we will continue to look to work constructively together, but there will be things we will disagree on.
Let's create the conditions.
2022 will also be remembered for how Xi Jinping consolidated power at home. This drama unfolded at a public meeting of the National Congress. Former Chinese leader Hu Jintao was physically removed from his seat and dramatically escorted out of the meeting. Relations between India and China have been worsening. The 9th of December, Indian and Chinese troops clashed in the Tawang sector of India's Arunachal Pradesh state. Soldiers from both sides reportedly suffered minor injuries in the skirmish. The two world powers share a 3,440-kilometer-long de facto border called the Line of Actual Control. In June 2020, in the Galwan Valley in the Ladakh region, a major battle broke out. Fought with sticks and clubs, it was the first fatal confrontation between the two sides in nearly 45 years.
I would say over the long term, China constitutes a threat to some of its neighbors. Obviously, there is India, where there are quite considerable territorial conflicts. Maybe it's not sufficient to look at the year 2020 or 2022 alone, because especially the year of the Party Congress, with the invasion of Ukraine by Russia, and with considerable dynamic in the United States policy, and especially on China, the situation was a little bit unlike previous years.
Xi Jinping! Xi Jinping!